All right. So we got I think we got one of the widest spreads we've ever had, but it's 35-25 right now. So see if you can catch up. But I am up first this week. So with my first pick and the first overall pick of the week 10 Sunday six pack, I am going with the Pittsburgh Steelers plus 1.5 at home against the New Orleans Saints. And there's a few things I like in this matchup. The first thing is I think you're getting some value due to the warped perception of both teams. So first, with Pittsburgh, strength of schedule. New Orleans has played an average schedule, but Pittsburgh's played the league's toughest schedule. Every single team that the Steelers have faced this year ranks in the top 13 in overall DVOA, which is pretty nuts. So, they've managed to face 8 of the top 13 teams in the league in their 8 games this year. Cincinnati 7, New England 13, Cleveland 11, Jets 8, Buffalo 2, Tampa 10, Miami 12th, and the Eagles are number 1. And then on the other side, I think New Orleans is a little bit inflated due to playing 4 of their last 5 games at home in the Dome. And, they also had a London game, so they haven't had a true road. They only had 1 true road game in their last 6, but 4 of the last 5 have been at home. And now, they're going on the road. They're favored here. This is a coin flip game to me. You look at New Orleans, it's been ugly when they're outside of the Dome. At home, I mean, they're still 2-3 against the spread, which is not great, but they're beating the spread by an average of 1.2 points at home. When they go on the road, they're 0-3 against the spread, and they're falling short of the spread by an average of 6.7 points per game. And in terms of the actual X's and O's here, I like Pittsburgh's run defense in this spot. We know New Orleans, that's what they like to do. They like to run on early downs. They like to run, to set up the pass, run early, run often. If they can run all day, they will. Pittsburgh, number 10 in DVOA against the run on first down, number 5 on second down, and they are number 9 in both early down rush EPA and early down rush success rate. So like the matchup for Pittsburgh's run defense. They also are pretty good against backs out of the backfield, which is key when you're facing Kamara. 4.75 yards per target allowed to running backs. That's 8th best. And, if Pittsburgh can stop the run, I really think New Orleans is going to struggle here, because I think they kind of got exposed last week when, they couldn't get that run game going against a Baltimore defense that came in, obviously on paper, it wasn't good against the run, but they got some reinforcements in their second level, and they've held New Orleans to just 15 for 48. So I think Pittsburgh can do something similar because they've been good on early downs against the run all year long. And you look at Pittsburgh and where they've really struggled on defense, and it's been these mobile quarterbacks. Josh Allen, they gave up 38 points, 432 net passing yards. Jalen Hurts, 35 points, 290 net passing yards. Everyone else, 20.7 points per game and just under 250 net passing yards per game, including holding the Bucs to 18 points and 229 yards in week 6, and Miami to 16 points and 261 net pass yards in week 7. So I think this Pittsburgh defense can get it done. Obviously, we're going to have to get something here from Kenny Pickett, but they're coming off the bye. So this is pretty much the best time to kind of invest in, a quarterback like this who has been struggling, but is a young quarterback, does have some upside. He should have a pretty clean pocket. New Orleans, for whatever reason, they've just been struggling to get pressure this year. They're bottom 5 in pressure rate, which always surprises me. I keep thinking they're going to kind of shoot up their rankings, and they just don't. So now we're in week 10 and they're still, 28th in pressure rate. And New Orleans has struggled against mobile quarterbacks as well. We saw Lamar last week, but overall in the season, they are bottom 10 in rushing yards per game to quarterbacks, yards per carry to quarterbacks. So hopefully Pickett can do enough here. I think Pittsburgh's defense will kind of carry them. I think it's a better matchup than people think. And of course, I think Tom was going to have them ready to play, 48, 26 and 3 against the spread, 65% as an underdog in his career, 25, 9 and 1 against the spread, 74% as an underdog versus an opponent with a better record. And when Tomlin is a home dog, 15, 3 and 3 against the spread, 83% and he covers by an average of 6.5 points per game. So give me the Pittsburgh Steelers plus 1.5 at home against New Orleans.
Yeah, I would look that way. I'll have something on this game later in the show. You should get Watt back as well. I think he's going to play.
Yeah, that'd be gravy. Like that would be gravy.
Yeah, Watt. I mean, the defense, if you look over the past years when he's on and off the field, it's about a yard per play difference. It's just massive. And I do agree. That's the key with Pickett coming off a bye for a rookie quarterback. You know, you get a really good scripted portion here. And yeah, he's going to have a clean pocket. The Saints can't get pressure. The Saints have also been beat up, and they got more beat up against Baltimore. You know, they have offensive line injuries. McCoy left. You have Pete, who's banged up. Davenport on the defensive side. Lattimore's still missing. The receivers are all banged up. So I think it's a good spot and a good rah-rah spot for the Steelers. But I will have more on this game later. For my first pick in the second overall of the Week 10 Sunday six-pack, I'm going with the Green Bay Packers +5. My favorite team in the NFL. I am 8-0 betting on their games this year. This line to me is way too high. By the way, it's the first time Aaron Rodgers will ever be more than a field goal underdog at home. Cowboys are coming off a bye. Historically, you look back past 10 years, bye is worth about a half point. Can be a little more, can be a little less depending on the situation. But generally speaking, on average, it's worth about a half point. But if you look back a couple weeks ago, Green Bay went to Buffalo, another good home field advantage like Lambeau. Bills are coming off a bye. Bills were right around 10.5 point favorites. This line, Packers covered, by the way, for me. This line implies that the Cowboys and the Bills at full strength are on equal playing fields, which is not the case. The Packers have been, and if you look at check out our Action Network luck rankings, our analytics team does a great job. Sean Kerner and company do a great job with those. This is, I assume, the number one pick this week. Packers have just been extremely unlucky. The perception on Green Bay is outrageous. Last week, for example, against Detroit, I graded them as a 13-point winner, and they lost the game outright. I think their first 3 drives were inside the 20. They got zero points. And if you look, ask somebody what they think of the Vikings and the Packers. And people think the Packers are decent, and people think the Vikings are decent. The Packers are awful. Well, if you look, let's just take Football Outsiders DVOA, for example. The Packers are 15th. The Vikings on offense. The Vikings are 16th. How about defense? The Packers are 18th. The Vikings are 19th. If you look at, the Packers offense, their 11th in success rate, 2nd in rush success rate. They've just been extraordinarily unlucky in the red zone with turnovers, particularly timing of turnovers, and on fourth downs. They are 3 of 15 on fourth downs, negative 30 EPA. They've lost 30 points on fourth down attempts, just a high variance down where you would expect some regression, especially for a team that's 2nd in the NFL in rush success rate. Their defense, is vulnerable against the run, which is a bit of a concern here. But overall, it's been okay. There are some injuries, which are definitely worth noting here. But the Packers are an average team. That's what they are. They have a poor record at 3-6 because they've been unlucky. But they're an average team, no matter what you look at. You can look at, net yards per drive. They're 12th in the NFL. How about net yards per play? 14th. By the way, Vikings are 24th in net yards per play. They've scored the same number of offensive touchdowns as their opponents. They're averaging 50 more yards per game than their opponents. They have major flaws, right? They don't have explosiveness with their receivers. Their run defense is bad. Their special teams are poor. But this is just a typical classic buy low spot on the Packers at home. And this is their season. They lose this game, their season is over against a Cowboys team that I think is a bit inflated in the market after, beating up on some bad teams last month and in general over the course of the season. They have dominated games when they can dominate opposing offensive lines. The way that the Packers offense works, it's not, the Green Bay's going to come out, they're going to lean on their run game, and it's just going to be short, quick passes. And Green Bay's offensive line, I think, is in the best shape that it's been all year. They finally had Jenkins playing left guard. Bakhtiari split snaps at left tackle with Tom, the rookie, who's been really good. I like him at that left tackle spot. So they finally have some continuity in the lineup that they want. So, yeah, I mean, I'm taking 5 here all day. I think this line should be 3. Classic buy low spot on the Packers, who have been very unlucky. There's going to be a game or two, a stretch where people are like, oh, the Packers are back, when really it's just all of the regression in the red zone, on 4th downs, in turnovers. So, yeah, give me Green Bay here, catching 5 and an inflated number. I'll go to war here with Rodgers as a dog, and dogs in this range all season have just been straight cash in this scoring environment. So give me the Packers.
Yeah, I know they have, because I've been betting against the Packers with dogs in this range. Yeah, like I was really interested in what your breakdown was going to be, because I'm not really there. I worry about this getting away from the Packers a little bit, just because I think Dallas, they're going to be able to run. I think they're going to be able to throw. Rashawn Gary is a big loss on the edge for Green Bay. But also, this is just one of those spots where I don't like to bet the Packers, because Dallas is one of those teams that can rush 4 and get pressure. And that's always kind of been, historically, the way you beat Rodgers before he started sucking with this offense. But, I get it. They've been unlucky. So I can't really hate on the play too much, but just, from a kind of a gut feel perspective, just a little bit worried that this could get away from them. Like, if it, do you think the Packers in this spot, like they end up winning or losing by like 3, or do you think they need like a backdoor?
I think they might win this game. But if a backdoor is needed and you're down 10 late, just like in the Bills game, it'll be nice to have Rodgers. And yeah, I just don't think the pressure means as much here, because it's a very efficient offense. It's just lacking explosive. Then they just get stopped in the red zone or on 4th downs. They're going to run the ball a lot, you can run on this Dallas team, and it's just going to be short, quick passes. It's not like this old Packers offense that is going to be throwing it downfield, and then if you can disrupt the pocket, then it's game over for the offense. So yeah, I think the Packers are going to lean on the run game. They're really slow, shorten this game. And, people forget in the similar spot against the Bills, they ended up getting the back door, but you look at that box score, they went 0-2 on 4th down in Bills territory. It could have been a completely different game. And yeah, I just think this is the spot. I mean, this is basically saying the Packers, no matter what metric you look at, are an average team. Like, they're just a dead average team that it's been unlucky, right? So they're probably going to win like 8 or 9 games this year. And that's who they are. So an average team in the NFL catching 5 at home with one of the best home fields in the NFL. That means, you're saying the Cowboys are a touchdown better than an average team in the NFL. And I do not get there at all.
I mean, if they had Cooper Rush starting this game, they would be.
Yeah.
All right. Are you done, or do you have more?
Yeah, no, that's it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think that the Packers have not been as bad as people think, and this line is inflated, and there's also just looming regression here, where you might see the Packers go like 5 of 5 on 4th down and score 3 touchdowns on their 3 red zone trips and win this game outright.
Yeah, this is your specialty. Like me, I'm like, I'm looking to like fade the Packers when they're sucking, but now that they're like 5-point underdogs, I can't do anything with it. So I'll be rooting for you though. For my second pick and the 3rd overall of the week, number 10 Sunday 6-pack presented by FanDuel, I'm going with the Seattle Seahawks +3 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I look forward to your what you have to say about this, because I know you're on the Bucks at 2.5. But I look at these teams, and we're in week 10 now, and it's a neutral field, so I have this as pretty much a coin flip game. I don't think that Tampa Bay is markedly better than Seattle at all. I mean, if you look at overall DVOA, Seattle 5th, Tampa Bay 10th. Offensive DVOA, Seattle 7th, Tampa Bay 17th. Defensive, Tampa Bay is 7th, Seattle's 12th. Special teams, Seattle is 7th, Tampa Bay is 19th. So Seattle has the edge overall. Seattle has the edge offensively, and Seattle has the edge in special teams. And the gap in defense is the closest gap of any of them. It's just 5 spots. So, that's kind of how it's been this year. And just looking at this Tampa Bay team, just like I said last week, I'm gonna test this Packer team, let them, outscore the Lions. Well, it's kind of the same thing with this Tampa Bay team. It's okay, let's see if you can get some separation here against the Seattle Seahawks, who, they're not world beaters, but they're a pretty solid football team. They drafted well. So I think a lot of people are still underestimating them because a lot of their players that are making the difference between what they're actually doing and their preseason prior are guys who are like young and unproven, and a lot of people just don't know them. But when I look at this Tampa Bay offense, I'm going to bet against them all day because week 9, last week against the Rams, they didn't turn the ball over. They ran 79 plays, 79, and they gained 323 yards. They needed 79 plays without a turnover to gain 323 yards. That's 4.1 yards per play. And that Ram defense is, statistically speaking, very similar to the Seahawks. The Rams are 13th in DVOA. The Seahawks are 12th, and they're even better than that over the last month or so of the season. And just going back, these last 4 games for Tampa Bay, like ever since that game against Kansas City, which wasn't a good game for Tampa Bay, but at least they put some points on the board, it's just been downhill. I mean, they had that Falcons game where they stopped scoring. So these last 4 games, they're doing absolutely nothing on offense. And, they played 16 quarters over the last 4 games, obviously, and they've been leading by more than 3 points for less than 2 of those quarters. About 11% of the time they've had a lead of more than 4 points. And they're playing the Steelers, the Panthers. I mean, it's not all, the Rams, who aren't, as you talked about last week, aren't very good. The Ravens, the only team in there that are, I think is a formidable opponent. And you look at, the Bucs have been struggling on offense. The defensive rankings of these last 4 teams: Pittsburgh 20th, Carolina 28th, Baltimore 15, Rams 13. That's an average of 19th. Seattle's better than all of them. They're the second best they faced all year. Since week 4, they're 9th in EPA per play, 8th if you remove turnovers. And Tampa Bay, outside of Raymond James Stadium this year, just 308 yards per game total of offense, 15 points per game of offense. You look at the red zone, Tampa Bay offense, 29th in DVOA, Seattle D 15th. Seattle actually struggles in the red zone themselves on offense, 24th, but Tampa Bay's defense is 30th. So, yeah, I just don't see how there's like this big of a difference between these two teams at this point. Tampa Bay loses Shaq Barrett, 22 pressures, their best edge rusher. I just think Seattle here is the more consistent offensive team, and Tampa Bay, everything's been a struggle for them. I mean, they needed the Rams to essentially go in play the ultra conservative and Cooper Kupp to slide instead. We could have got the first down just to have a second chance to win that game. It didn't bowl well. I don't think for them to cover this number especially when you're getting the 3 here, because now they got to win by 4. They got to win by a touchdown. I just don't see Tampa Bay doing it. They haven't been doing it in any of these games since early in the season. And week 10 dogs against favorites on a 1-2 game winning streak, 51-31-2 against the spread, 62% since 2006. Give me the Seahawks +3 on a neutral field in Germany against the Bucs.
Yeah, I love the Bucs here for reasons. Like, yeah, if you look at DVOA, the Seahawks are going to be better than the Bucs in a lot of categories. By the way, the Packers better than the Vikings in those categories. It's very troubling. No, I'm saying it's very troubling because the Vikings have played a number of backups. DVOA doesn't account for injuries, and the Seahawks have been very, very fortunate on that front on their own, and then of teams that they faced. Whereas the Bucs haven't been healthy all year. This is the healthiest they'll be. I'm assuming Antoine Winfield is coming back this week. He's their highest graded defensive player, and he's so important to everything that they want to do. Their secondary's been banged up. Their receivers have been banged up. And I look at their red zone numbers as a positive moving forward. There should be some regression there. And yeah, the Rams game, I gave them a bump and downgraded the Rams. I mean, I had them that as a massive win. They outgained them like 330-200. They needed a second chance. They took 80
players though to get those. Granted, I'm not knocking the defense. Don't get me wrong, but like we know the Rams offense can't block. So it's like,
yeah, but I'm just saying, you say that they got a second chance, but they scored a touchdown that bounced off Scotty Miller's face mask wide open. Like that, things like that have been happening in the red zone. You know, it looks like Cameron Braid will be back. That should help in the red zone. But their offense has just not had any continuity. Their receivers have been in and out and banged up all year. And most importantly, it's the secondary. Todd Bowles needs a healthy secondary to do what he wants to do, and that's blitz and bring pressure. And if you can do that and stop the run, which a healthy Bucs defense can do, then Geno Smith turns into a pumpkin. I mean, last week he was horrendous because the Cardinals blitz a lot. They actually stopped the run, as I thought. And Geno Smith last week, 2.2 air yards per attempt. He had 2 touchdown throws after 2 dropped picks and threw a pick 6. The week before against the Giants, he was the 23rd rated quarterback, another team that blitzes. But guess what? Both those teams have awful secondaries, the Giants and the Cardinals. The Bucs don't. The Bucs have one of the best now that they're fully healthy. And Geno Smith against the blitz has just been, he's been bad. He's the 23rd graded quarterback when blitz. When not blitz, he's second. And Tampa could defend the run well and blitz. That's the formula to shut down the Seattle offense, which, look, if you look at Geno Smith, he's been good. He's now, the love on him has gone way over. But he's had 3 massive games against the Saints after London, Detroit, and the Giants when they didn't blitz. He had 11 big-time throws, 1 turnover-worthy play in those 3 games. The other 6 games, 7 big-time throws, 12 turnover-worthy plays, 8 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, despite a 7-11 big-time throw to turnover-worthy play. He's been pretty fortunate on some throws. Last week there was 2 drop picks and another pick 6. And if you look at Seattle's body of work, it's like 1/3 of their wins came over the incompetent Cliffs. You know, they beat the Giants in a great spot, the beat-up Chargers, the beat-up Lions, and the Broncos in the opener. The Broncos aren't anything home to write about, but the Broncos actually dominated that game. Also, the Seahawks, if you look at that game last week, a lot of that just came down to they were able to get pressure at 43% of snaps because Arizona lost another interior lineman. They couldn't even snap the ball. It was really pathetic. And then they just had blown coverages on short passes. But Seattle can't get pressure normally. Well, that's good against Brady. Brady's been very good when he's not pressured this year. I also think Tampa can relax after last week. Like, got that game-winning drive. It just looks like they were able to exhale on the sidelines. And it's also much tougher travel here for Seattle. You know, they were just on the road out west. Now you're going overseas, and they're a much younger team, much more inexperienced. And I think these spots favor the favorites, who are have a very good straight up record. They're 23-14 against the spread. Tom Brady, 4th game overseas. He's 3-0 straight up and against the spread, covering by 20 points per game in international games. And it's just a very experienced Bucs team that I think will treat this more like a business trip. Seahawks getting a lot of love. And I don't know. I just think it's a great matchup. And if you look at the Seahawks, who they've played, their strength of schedule without adjusting for injuries, I have as the 30th. If you adjust for injuries, I have a dead last in the NFL. And I just think this is a nightmare matchup for them. I think Geno Smith is going to have a rough day because Todd Bowles, with his healthy secondary, is going to send the house. And you're going to see some turnover-worthy throws from Geno. And Brady and company will do enough on offense to get this done. I love the Bucs. If it was still 2.5, then it would have been one of my picks, but it's moved to 3 at FanDuel. So I decided to pass. But if I had to take a side of 3, I would still take the Bucs. And I think that there's a reason why this line is moving up, despite the entire world is going to bet Seattle again.
Listen, I'm not saying the Bucs are some I think the Bucs are fine, but you can't just talk about opponent strength of schedule and all that with the Seahawks and gloss over that the Bucs in the last 4 games have scored under 15 points a game against the Steelers, Panthers, Ravens, and Rams with, by the way, Godwin, Evans, and Donovan Smith playing pretty much every snap in all of those games. And that Falcons game where they only scored 21 and didn't score for essentially, at the last 20 minutes of the game or something like that. So this has been a ongoing issue with this offense. I'm not saying Geno Smith is going to win MVP or, all this, whatever. I'm just saying they're any competent team, which I think the Seahawks are, is not like the Bucks aren't going to be able to separate from them. That's my thing. It's like the Bucks offense, everything's a struggle. It's like Brady, we watch Brady now, is you watch him throw, and there's no margin for error on these throws anymore. It's everything is like it's either squeezed in or it's in a tough spot and the receiver drops it, or there's just nothing's coming easy for this team. So if I'm getting 3 points on a neutral field for a team that hasn't topped 21 points despite playing the Falcons, Steelers, Panthers, the only team they scored 22 against the Ravens on last second touchdown, like that, to me that's a good value.
We shall find out. I think it's a great matchup from spot for Tampa. We will find out on Sunday morning. Yeah, I had some Seahawks trolls. They were like, "You're a hater of Seattle." I faded them. I faded them against the Falcons, and then I bet them against Denver. That was the third time the second time I bet against them all year. I 1-1, and I came away not impressed in that game. I mean, Geno Smith did nothing. It's a couple drop picks. That was all Arizona.
Oh yeah,
incompetence.
Can we talk about Arizona real quick? Just how they didn't cover that same tight end leak out. Not even just in the first half, but then Seattle was able to come right back with it in the second half, and even on the key play of the game to ice the game like that. Wow. I mean, that was nuts. But where are you going for your second?
For my second pick and the fourth overall, the Week 10 Sunday 6-pack, I'm going with the Cleveland Browns plus 3.5 at the Miami Dolphins. If you look at these teams' records, and I dug in a lot into this game. If you look at these teams' records, right, the Browns are 3-5, and the Dolphins are 6-3, getting all kinds of love. The Browns have been better overall this year. The Browns offense is good. It's top 5 EPA. They're one of 2 teams that's had a positive EPA on offense in all but one game this year. And if you look at it's basically just come down to who's been better in the really close games. The Dolphins are 5-0 in games decided by 6 points or less. Right? They beat Baltimore by 4 in the luckiest win of the season. They had a 1% post-game win probability. They beat Buffalo by 2, got outgained by about 300 yards. They beat Pitt at home by 6. You were just talking about not
that was a weird
Pitt.
one. Yeah.
They scored 16 at home. They beat Detroit by 4, trailing the entire game, get a 4th down stop late. Then they beat Chicago by 3. I mean,
and they missed a call at the end of that game that could have gave Chicago a chance.
Give up the problem with the Dolphins are now, yes, their offense is good, and they have great receivers. Couple problems with them. They're the worst special teams in the NFL. Every phase is bad right now, and their defense is horrific. They have too many injuries in the secondary. They can't stop anybody. I think Justin Fields set the quarterback rushing record last week, broke Michael Vick's record. Their defense is bad. And meanwhile, the Browns, who are 1-4 in games decided by 6 or less. So you have one team that's 5-0, the other team that's 1-4. And by the way, the Browns have 5, if you look at estimated wins, 5.1 estimated wins. The Dolphins are 5.0. And the Browns have 3 fewer wins. But the Browns lost this year. They lost by 1 to the Jets. Game they should have won by 2 touchdowns, melted down late. They lost by 3 to Atlanta. Again, another game that I had them graded as a winner. Lost by 2 to the Chargers. Chance to win that game. Lost by 3 at the Ravens. Should have won that game. I'm a Ravens fan. They held the Baltimore to about 200 yards of offense. And look, they're off of a bye here with improving health. Should get Denzel Ward back. And the biggest thing for me is the offense has been great all year. And they'll be able to move the ball here, control the clock, keep that Miami offense off the field. Their defense has improved significantly. Over their past 2 games against the Bengals and the Ravens, over that 2-week stretch, they were 7th at EPA per play, 5th in EPA per dropback. Myles Garrett is obviously dominating games right now, but their back end, they had some schematic changes coming in the year. And a lot of people, including myself, thought this was going to be a top 10 defense. They were lost just communication-wise, run defense. No one knew where to go. they have addressed a lot of those issues. If you watch their defense over the past 2 games, now, you're getting healthier and you have a bye week. I expect that defense to continue trending up, whereas the Dolphins need to get healthier in the secondary before you see any uptick on that side of the ball. But guys are finally in the right place for Cleveland on defense, which is massive. Obviously, Garrett being in there and healthy can change games on his own. But yeah, I think that the perception on these two teams is way off. The Browns should have 5, maybe 6 wins, and the Dolphins probably should have 4 or 5 wins this year. And look, all the Dolphins are doing is they can't get separation because everyone can score on them. I'll gladly take the Browns here in what I think is a pretty good matchup, catching over a field goal, coming off of a bye in what is basically their season. They need to win this game. I thought all the stops here.
I thought about this one. This kind of was in like the final running for me. The one thing that gave me pause was the one place I do actually think Miami defensively matches up well is they're pretty good at limiting opposing running games, like running backs in base defense. And that's obviously a big part of the Browns, offensive attack. So, they're 7th in run defense DVOA, but they're 2nd in running back yards allowed per carry. They are 4th in adjusted line yards. They're 6th in power rank. They're top 5 in stuff rate. So that is the one thing. It's like, Cleveland, they should be able to run on anybody, but that was kind of the one thing giving me pause, just because I know Miami's going to put up some points regardless of how much improved Cleveland's defense is, which I agree. I was on them. I think you were too against the Bengals, right, on that Monday night game. Yeah. And I kind of said, hey, the Browns are, they're a lot better than the defensive metrics. But that was just the one thing.
Yeah, if you go back to the Ravens game is when I really saw it. And then for them to back it up against the Bengals the week after. So I went back and looked. I was talking to some of friends of mine who were close to the Browns organization. And when I went back and watched, they agreed with me. It was basically just like, yeah, there was too many complex things going on early in the season. People just weren't in the right spot. And you could see that. And over the past 2 games, they were. That Ravens game, I was really impressed. And it was just another unlucky result for the Browns. They even had an offensive pass interference. They had the game-winning touchdown. It was called OPI. The Browns had 340 yards in Baltimore in that game, averaged 6 yards per play. Baltimore 250, averaged 4 yards per play. Browns should have won that game, like a bunch of others this year. So, I think there's some value in Cleveland here over a field goal. Where are you going next?
My third and final pick in the 5th overall of the Week 10 Sunday 6-pack presented by FanDuel. I'm going with the Minnesota Vikings plus 3.5 at Buffalo. And, full disclosure, I played this at 4.5, but, with Josh Allen healthy, I make it about Buffalo by 6. So, this line to me still doesn't quite bake it out. I don't think he's going to play. It's with the injury he has, yes, it's like a pain tolerance thing, but it's also something that if they rested him a week, I think it would be a lot better. So I don't think he's going to play. So I'm just kind of taking a team here in Minnesota that, we kind of talked about it. They are not as good as their record, but I think they're competent enough to kind of hold things close here against this Buffalo team that a little bit out of sorts. I mean, even like there's something's going, like Buffalo's in certain areas not quite as good as you would think. Like, for example, we think of Buffalo as this team, okay, they got Von Miller, they can get pressure now. They're just 20th in pressure rate this season. And, that's kind of surprising to me. Poyer didn't practice Wednesday, Edmonds, Rousseau, Poyer, I think might miss again. So I think this Buffalo team just a little banged up. I don't think if it comes down to holding guys out for this game, out of conference games, not a division game, I think they're going to play it conservative. And on the other side, Minnesota, they're up to 15th in pressure rate and they're not blitzing. They're 27th. So their plus 7.1% pressure minus blitz rate is actually 3rd best in the league. So that's kind of a metric I use to see, how good a team's four-man can be. And I think, with that kind of defense, they're going to kind of sit back. They can get some pressure. And on the other side, you got competent, skilled guys all over. Hawkinson actually made much a bigger impact than I thought he was going to make in the first game, which could be big with Buffalo banged up at safety, because usually they just shut down opposing tight ends. But I think you can run on Buffalo a little more now. We saw that with the Jets. And, Zach Wilson can go and pull off a win against this Bills team with Josh Allen playing. I'll take the what are they, 7-1 now? 7-1 Minnesota Vikings. I'll take the 7-1 Minnesota Vikings to hold it close here as well. Week 10 underdogs on the road with a negative ATS differential, which the Vikings have. They haven't been great against the spread. Those teams are 54-30-3, 64% against the spread since 2005. Road dogs that are 500 or below against the spread that opened plus 2.5 or higher in weeks 10 or 11, 113, 59, and 5 against the spread, 66% since 2005. So give me the Vikings plus 3 at Buffalo.
Yeah, I'm way higher on this spread than you. If Allen was healthy and the Bills were at full strength, I'm at like 9.
Oh, wow.
3. So then you could say Allen's worth like 6-ish points. There's some other injuries to keep. If I'll look at the Bills if I can get under 3. The Vikings are 6-0 one possession games. That's the most wins of all time. Best record of all time through this point in the season in the history of the NFL. They've been outplayed in almost every single game. Like I said, they were 24th in net yards per play. This team just has flaws all over, and they just keep stealing games late in the fourth quarter. Did it again last week against Washington. But, Dantzler's out, which is worth noting. The rookie Evans is going to get his first start at corner for Minnesota. But the Bills we got to wait on out. I don't think he's going to play either. He's going to push to play. But McDermott said day-to-day usually means out this week based on his history. Milano looks like he'll be in. It's an important piece that they missed last week. Trey White, does he come back? We'll see. Poyer, he's hurt. Russo, week to week. So McDermott said he's not going to play this week. So there's a lot of injuries for this Bills team. Their defense is definitely not at full strength, which is something to monitor. But this line might go too far if Allen is ruled out. I might back the Bills, but there's so much uncertainty right now. I don't mind that you grabbed that number, because I also agree that I think Allen's going to sit out here.
Yeah.
There's no reason to, I think it's just a pain tolerance thing, but there's just no reason to rush him back this week with where they sit in the playoff picture. It's not like they need to win this game.
Yeah, I think you could get some kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like residual value here, because I think if Allen sits, I think they may be more likely to be conservative with some of the other guys. You know what I mean? Because it's just like, all right, let's just get everybody, almost like a bye week, kind of thing. Yeah. So, and like, I like when we talk about these teams being lucky, and like I totally agree. I've said this, I bet against Minnesota last week, and I think the last 2 weeks actually I bet against Minnesota. But my philosophy is always with the luck thing is like, I want points, right? So like, I'm not gonna necessarily like weigh points just to fade a team that's been lucky. Like I always want to wait until I have points. So I'm gonna be fading Minnesota at some point again, but right now I'm getting points for a team that they essentially have the MVP at quarterback, and he's not likely to play. So I'll take that all day.
Yeah, and I wouldn't fade Minnesota here if Allen is out at over. Field goals are just so valuable, especially this year. But I would look at Minnesota. I would look at Buffalo potentially, depending on some of their other injuries, if this line goes down under 3, which I think it might, if Allen is officially ruled out, depending on some of the injuries.
The question is, The question is, if the Vikings win this game, what's Kirk O'Chain's gonna do on the flight home?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if the Vikings win this game. I mean, they pretty much will, I assume, lock up the division, and then they're home against Dallas next week. I guess the hope is that
good game.
If they do, then Dallas loses at Green Bay. And then you might get some value on Dallas next week, but we got to get through this week first. Yeah, because then after that Dallas game, like say Minnesota steals this, then they got Dallas at home. And then it's like Pats at home, Jets at home, Lions, Colts, Giants at home. And they close the year with Green Bay and Chicago. That loss to Philly hurts though, because the head-to-head, but and the Eagles have such an easy schedule, but at least the Vikings will provide a threat to the Eagles. If they can steal this game in Buffalo, like they're going to be right there because of their schedule the rest of the way. If the Eagles slip up a couple times, because their schedule gets very easy the rest of the way. So it'll be interesting to watch.
What's weird about Minnesota too, before we'll move on in a second, but it's like for all we're talking about with Minnesota and they've kind of outplayed, they've won more than what they should. It's weird because on paper, they're actually a very talented team that probably just should be playing better too. So like, that's something I'm also watching for. Like, is Minnesota just going to actually start playing up to its potential? But all right, where are you going?
All right, for my third pick and the 6th overall of the Week 10 Sunday 6-pack, I'm going with the Jacksonville Jaguars plus 9.5 at the Kansas City Chiefs. Just going to keep this one simple. I just think this is too many points. I think this line should be right around a touchdown. Actually, have a tad less. And if you're going to fade the Chiefs, this is when you fade them. They, as a favorite of 7 or more. Mahomes as a favorite of a touchdown plus, 12-17 against the spread. As a favorite of 3.5 or more, 27-31 and 1 against the spread. Favorite of 3 or less, or dog, he's just beyond elite. But the Jags, look, they can't close out games, but they're pesky, and they'll be in every game. They're 1-6 in one-possession games. It wouldn't shock me if they won this game and got a couple breaks to go their way, because the Chiefs have also been flirting with losing to inferior teams at home all year. Here are their games at home this year. They beat the Titans, who had no completions to a receiver, by 3 in overtime. They beat the Raiders by 1. Easily could have lost that game. They lost to Buffalo, and they beat the Chargers by 3. Easily could have lost that game. I mean, those are their home games this year. So they've been flirting with Luke, and last week was a physical game. And look, Kelsey's going to eat. If you look, I'm afraid of that against the Jags, who can't cover tight ends. But there's just, the Chiefs' offensive line isn't right, and their defense, you could score on them. So I think that the Jags will do enough here to stay within this number. And it's just a game where the Chiefs will, the back door might be open here, but the Chiefs aren't going to show a ton. It's just like, let's get out with a win. They have the Chargers on deck, which basically will decide the division. They can sweep the Chargers, and Broncos and Raiders are out of it. So I think this is a good spot to back the Jags, who every single one of their games this year has been decided by one possession. Mm-hmm. And the Chiefs at home have just been flirting with inferior teams all year. And they definitely have some flaws, and they're not as explosive. Now, if you get the Chiefs that are just like juggernaut Chiefs, which, once a month you'll get, then the Jags are cooked. But if you don't, Jags should hang around here. And I think this number is a bit inflated, and especially this season, catching 9.5 with a competent team. The Jaguars are competent on offense, and they just can't close out games. But I don't need them to do that here, catching 9.5. Also, you won't see this go in the app because it's in a dead range. So you might as well wait, as I'm doing, to see if a 10 pops at any point in time. The risk of going from 9.5 to 9 is meaningless. So, follow along the Action Network app. I'll put this in at 10 if it gets there. If not, and I see it come down, I'll bet it, at 9.5, I could still find one, or 9, or I'll be on this regardless. But we're taking 9.5 here for the contest.
Yeah, this is another one I'm kind of going back and forth on whether I want to bet it. If I had bet it, I would have probably picked it first, because I swore you were going to pick it first for some reason. But there are some, there are things I like about the Jags in this spot. Number one, there's just so many points against Mahomes. Number two, they're actually top 10 in pressure rate, which is, you're never going to completely stop this offense, but Mahomes 116 passer rating clean, 77 under pressure. So, that definitely helps. But
Yeah,
they're
that offensive
also
line has problems right now. You saw
yeah.
Tennessee was just destroying them up front.
Yeah. And then there's a couple of things that give me pause too. About the game, kind of like you said, getting the juggernaut Chiefs here. One is I still don't know if I can trust Trevor Lawrence against non-Indianapolis Colts teams or not. Like, so the Raiders last week, this team is not well coached at all, because I've talked about this. Like, Trevor Lawrence has been struggling all year against man coverage. This whole Jags offense has been struggling against man coverage. You make him make tight window throws. Just, he's a little bit off. He puts the ball in harm's way. The Raiders, they play like almost all zone, and like they were the let me say it again. The Raiders played more zone against the Jags than pretty much anyone besides the Colts did. And I just don't know how you do that. And of course, what do the Jaguars do? They're down 17-0 and they come back. Well, I'm looking at the Chiefs last week, and they actually played man coverage 58% of the time against Malik Willis. So, they got McDuffie, Jarius Sneed. I think they would feel comfortable playing. If they did it against the Titans, I do think they'll still feel comfortable playing it against the Jags. So that kind of worries me. And then on the other side of the ball, the thing that worried me about it getting away was, Jacksonville 15th in third down conversion rate allowed on defense and 8th and fourth down conversion rate. But that's a little bit deceiving. If you adjust for strength of schedule and you look at from a DVOA perspective, Jacksonville was 32nd in DVOA on third and fourth downs. And that just worries me against the Chiefs, because you could get some pressure here and there, and maybe you get a stop here and there. But if Mahomes is, just going to town on you on third down, you have no chance.